Thank you very much. Rushanara, please.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. I just wanted to pick up on some of the points that have been raised by the Chair and Angela. We have had the Woodford scandal, the London Capital Finance scandal. We've had the TSB technology failures. I've been on this committee throughout those scandals, and the FCA, and we've raised it with Charles Randall in the past. The FCA is often playing catch up for all sorts of reasons. Yesterday we had Mr. Greensill, and there's a bit of a formula with executives who get themselves into trouble. They come and apologize. They're often coached to do that, and then they find all sorts of reasons and excuses and blame lots of people and gaslight. That's what we saw yesterday. And the FCA, because of all sorts of institutional barriers that we know very well about, finds itself relatively inept at holding these people to account. And ultimately, the taxpayer ends up paying the price. Our constituents end up paying the price. Lord Minus has said that the Greensill scandal is going to lead to a direct cost of about £1 billion. Others have said it too. He was contesting, Greensill was contesting this yesterday, an indirect cost of 3 to 5 billion. So just to concentrate minds on both Mr. Randall and Mr. Rafi, or the regulators, we rely on you to protect the public interest. What we've seen is that the FCA often is playing catch up. Can I ask you, would you have announced this investigation if it wasn't for the Treasury Committee calling on you to explain and address in the letter from the Chair? Would you have actually proactively called for this investigation?
As I said, the investigation started some time ago before we received the letter from the Chair, and we certainly considered during the course of the start of that investigation whether to make an announcement or not. There are specific protocols around whether we announce investigation. That we only do so in exceptional circumstances for reasons you'll understand, because you don't want to prejudice ongoing investigations. I think at the point that the Treasury Committee launched an inquiry and included the much wider context here and the public interest involved, we felt it appropriate in these specific cases to confirm that an investigation is underway. And we have done that. A few other regulators around the world have done that. There are others, as I've noted in my letter, that are investigating that have chosen not to do that. Each has its own protocols around it.
Would you be able to tell us when it started? Would you go through?
As I said, the investigations of these three entities started in the first quarter of this year, March, I believe, with preparatory work in advance of the formal commencement of the investigation.
I mean, should we expect more of the same in the past? I mean, the reason why I'm asking, and perhaps Charles Randall can come in, the reason is because there's been huge disappointment in the past, because, in the end, what often happens is, even when there are clear cases of wrongdoing, and we've seen that since the global financial crisis, not much seems to happen. And these, as Angela said, people kind of often get away with it. Charles Randall, did you want to comment on this point about the wider issue about what our regulator, why our regulator doesn't manage to nail any of these people when they, frankly, I won't use the but I'm trying to find an appropriate phrase, but basically cause the taxpayer to be out of pocket?
Well, we do nail, as you put it, a number of people, and we publish the results of both criminal and regulatory investigations on a regular basis. We've prohibited a number of individuals, and we recover hundreds of millions of pounds in penalties from firms as well. We don't, however, when we're doing investigations, proceed on the basis that there's been clear wrongdoing. We proceed on the basis that there's a case to be investigated, and the safeguards which are enshrined in statute and in principles of fairness that apply in the UK mean that we have to follow procedures, and those procedures can be frustrating for us, and they can be very, very frustrating for you, I know that. but it is within a system of rule of law that we operate when we're investigating, and that leads to our investigations taking time. They do produce outcomes. We benchmark the time that our investigations take against other comparable jurisdictions. We've benchmarked ourselves against the US SEC and against the Australian securities regulator. Broadly speaking, the time to completion of the investigation is the same across those jurisdictions for complex cases. So I understand the point you're making, but I don't think it's, I don't think I can agree with it quite in the terms that you've put it forward.
Okay, so just could you just take us through, thank you for that. Nikhil Rathi, could you just take us through what the FCA's expectations are of portfolio managers of securitizations in the Greensill case, and also just picking up on the earlier points about risks being concealed, and some of this echoes financial crisis style sort of securitization issues. Could you reflect on what those checks are, and how what you think should happen? Leaving aside Greensill, there's a general point, isn't there, about systemic risk? Should we be worried about systemic risk that comes through in a different way, but can amount to huge problems?
Yeah, I'll take the general point. In this specific case, that they weren't securitizations reported under the securitization regulation. They were framed as commercial lending to the best of our understanding at this point. The general point I'd make is clearly anything that's touching the capital market, we want them to be following our rules around systems and controls, which is what the principal is responsible for in a principal AR relationship. As I've said already, I think we do need to strengthen the information flows we get globally to understand how risk is accumulating. But I would say also that, and I know that you'll be talking to the Bank of England as well, who lead on these assessments. Assessment to date has been that this was not a systemic event for UK financial stability. We entirely understand the consequences for individuals, for employees of some of the borrowers here. In terms of the tests and the UK legislation around financial stability, this wasn't identified as a systemic risk. And it is notable that a significant number of the borrowers were able to get alternative financing. The ones that haven't been able to get alternative financing probably have other wider commercial reasons why they are challenged. It's my understanding of the situation as it stands right now.
And what would you, both of you, say to Lord Miners's comment that yes, that the FCA, we refer to the FCA as being culpable for ignoring the warning signs on Greensill?
Yeah, I'm aware of Lord Miner's commentary, and I set out in the letter to the committee the regulatory framework, which is obviously set by Parliament in how these things are regulated, and we operate under that framework. But I've also given you the pointers where I think the regime can be strengthened, and we will be looking at those steps as well.
And then just one more, which is really about what would you be able to give us a sense of what we should expect to see at the end of this process? I mean, I just want to bring you back to the point about the cost to the taxpayer, and the billion direct costs and the indirect costs that Lord Miners was talking about. And the reason why I bring it back to that is because what's frustrating is that inquiries happen, the FCA will conduct investigations, and actually the outcomes are often not satisfactory when it comes to recovering money that the taxpayer loses. Should the taxpayer expect the FCA to be on its side, to be able to, if the investigation, once the investigation is concluded, that actually money that's lost to the taxpayer can be recovered without the taxpayer having to foot the bill?
It's not for me to comment on the specific taxpayer elements. Obviously, you're engaging with the government. What I'd say the taxpayers can expect from the FCA is that we will follow the law, which requires us, as we're starting an investigation, to do so open-mindedly. So I can't answer your question, much that I understand that will be frustrating for you as to where the end point will be, because we are required by statute to go into this in a completely open-minded way. But what I can assure you is that it will be with other agencies. It will be pursued vigorously and as expeditiously as we can.
Just one final thing, which is, I mean, we've seen yesterday a barrage of emails and messages, WhatsApp and so on, from the former Prime Minister. Obviously, there's been also contact with the FCA, obviously under your, not during your time, but under your predecessor. Do you think that Greensill was sort of off limits for the FCA in terms of what your organisation was doing, because he was so well connected, because the former Prime Minister was his, his patron as well as his employee, that he was so specifically lobbying for him across these very powerful institutions, including yours. Was he off limits? Was Greensill, the company, off limits? And could you have missed things as a result of that?
No, I've seen no evidence to suggest anything that would imply that because of the connection with the former Prime Minister, Greensill was felt to be off limits by the FCA. Nothing to suggest that in the records I've seen.
Okay. Mr. Randall, Charles Randall, did you want to say anything further?
No, I've also seen nothing of that sort, and I don't think it's evident from the documents that we sent to the committee either that they're.
What about as a culture? What about the culture of lobbying, the culture of power, people who are powerful? I mean, it's the barrage of those messages. I mean, if I was a civil servant, I was a civil servant for a period. Civil servants are often under the cosh. Their political masters give them direction, and it's not easy to defend. But in terms of it can be challenging and can put them in an awkward position. Do you think there is a culture that you mentioned the written, that no record in writing? But do you think that there is a wider issue about culture when powerful people? But I'm not just singling out the former Prime Minister, any former Prime Minister or somebody else that's powerful from a different party. But there is an issue about culture in our institutions and clubbiness.
Yeah, too right, well said.
Which can be quite damaging. Sorry, there's some background noise. Which can create the culture of certain people getting away with things, getting special treatment, having a different lane through which they operate, which is the sort of stuff that actually is just dangerous for our country, really, if that happens. Do you think there is an issue around that?
It's not something that I've seen. I've made it a rule during my time as chair that if I'm contacted by people who appear to me to have been trying to lobby me in relation to decisions by the FCA, that I politely decline and turn them away. And I try not to meet people if I think that is the reason why they're contacting me. I do meet a range of consumer and business stakeholders in order to get feedback about the performance of the FCA, but I always make it absolutely clear that our supervisory and enforcement decisions are not something that I intervene in. And on occasions, yes, one has to give that message quite strongly, but I think it's a very important message. We're an independent regulator.
Mr. Marthy, you're a former Treasury official. Does that affect your independence? Do you feel like, could there be some issues here around that? Because this particular case as well, just being open about it. This particular case involves the Treasury. Some of your former colleagues and so on. Is the independence, the point about independence, really important for the FCA? Do you think that we can be confident that the FCA will remain extremely independent as it proceeds with this inquiry and others, where it relates to political masters and powerful government departments.
Yes, you can. I think you can see that a few weeks ago we took forward a criminal case against a very large bank, which is part government owned. I won't comment any further on it, but because that's now subject to criminal proceedings. So what I would say in my time at the FCA, and this is a short period of time, I find that our investigators and are highly committed, highly purposeful, looking to secure the right outcome for the integrity of the markets and to protect consumers. And they're not influenced, as anything I've seen, by any of the sort of complexities of power that you described earlier. They want to get to the right answer.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Rushanara.